Hi, we are back. Welcome to episode 2. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
What's up?
Hey.
Episode 2.
All right, so welcome back to Unread, where we are sharing our thoughts and opinions about the past, present, and future of social as a team who thinks and talks about social's influence every single day. Let's jump into an icebreaker really quick. What was your last, on TikTok?
I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but I did see the security guard lady dancing at the Taylor Swift
I saw that. That was really charming.
That lady was having the time of her
sweet.
life. I mean, I've seen Taylor Swift ones, but that trend where it's someone revealing this big painting or something, but then people are putting clips of Pedro Pascal and other things inside of it.
Every Pedro Pascal meme.
It's all over my TikTok.
Every single one is gold.
I know. The sandwich eating one.
The Nick Cage one. Just anything you can do with Pedro Pascal is art.
I am scrolling past Pedro Pascal content. I like the guy, but
No.
I'm bored.
No.
Spicy
I don't
take.
approve.
That is actually a really hot take. That's the first person that I've ever
gonna be
heard
the
is
hottest take
now
in
I'm
this
scrolling
episode for
past
sure.
Pedro Pascal TikTok.
I get it. He's funny, he's charming, he's clever, he's daddy. I get it.
Daddy. All right. I guess on that note.
Sorry. Didn't mean to bring it down.
It's not even bringing it down. It's just all of us being is that gonna make the cut? Can we?
Yeah. Today we are talking about how social professionals can truly innovate in a world full of such fast and repetitive cycles. So we're going to get into how reinvention is being used to accelerate the future and what it looks like to create something that's truly unexpected right now. Why is it so important for us to unpack this topic? I think it's probably arguably one of the biggest ways social has transformed society to date.
Someone who leads a social team, this is something that keeps me up at night, and I've talked to many other social media professionals, and it keeps them up at night too, of how do I be innovative and how to use social to my advantage. I agree. I think social is one of the biggest ways that has transformed how brands can innovate. It's an untapped focus group, and the fact that social can influence a product is a pretty unique example of innovation. Heinz made a series of sauces, which still are on the market today. They sell them at Walmart. They have Cranch, which is ketchup and ranch. And I think they have Mayo Must, which is mayonnaise and mustard. All of these things, which I'm a huge fan of.
Oh, I thought I had a totally different Heinz example in my head.
What is your Heinz example?
I was thinking about the story that they had in their recent ad campaign.
Oh, I love that. I sent that to you.
Heinz, I think that was where I saw it. Yeah.
Even when it's not Heinz, it's Heinz or something like that.
Yeah,
Is that
even when it's not
yeah.
Heinz, it's
yeah.
Heinz. Yeah. I loved that because I thought that was people talk all the time about how restaurants do that, where they have the Heinz ketchup bottle, but they put whatever other maybe cheaper ketchup in there. They just need it to look like a Heinz bottle because that's what people like or care about, apparently.
Is the brand. Yeah.
Heinz capitalized on that.
Yeah.
It's a little provocative. It brought me to a diner. I felt like I was in a diner with the glass Heinz bottles in the ads. I was
I love things that bring
so
me to
many
spaces.
good feelings with friends, late nights in the diner from my hometown. It brought me to those moments, and I think that's why it worked.
And I do think that's a result of listening to what people are saying, outside of your marketing rooms, outside of these meetings. Yes. You're listening to what people are actually doing and saying with your product.
Exactly. It's translating what's happening in the world to the digital spaces, to social media, to advertisements.
And it just makes your brand look smarter because it makes your brand look like it's paying attention to the consumers that make it. But I really think that people should listen to audiences a little bit more on social about kind of driving research and development.
As marketers, we're thinking about introducing products and understanding whether this is the right audience we should be listening to. Is this our target audiences? Expanding into listening. I think it just becomes something that is always top of mind, and there's always going to be a subset of people who it doesn't resonate with. And so really fine-tuning that you're reaching the right audiences is just, it makes it more complex, much more anxiety-inducing sometimes.
It doesn't have to be the most outlandish, out-of-the-box idea. It just has to be like authentic and true to feel like it's something new.
Big agree. Yeah.
Taking it out of like the marketing room, like anywhere, anyone can have influence now. It's like not just those with like inherent influence like within an industry. Any consumer could have influence on like what Heinz' next product is, and like I feel like that is kind of like the really cool thing about this. I think the other thing that comes to like top of mind for me with this topic is like not only innovation, but like reinvention. And like, I know I sent all of you that Emma Chamberlain, who's probably like one of Gen Z's most influential creators, talked about how the internet has impacted creativity on her recent podcast episode. Just this feeling that like the internet is kind of at like an impasse of originality, and like whether or not that is a good thing or bad thing, it does impact like how brands create content, how creators are creating content, or even those of us who just consume content. Rachel had a hot take, like the Pedro Pascal trend on TikTok, but like there's like something to expect, but there's also the unexpected woven within that because you don't know how someone else is going to approach that same thing.
And I think creativity, originality, like it puts pressure on you as a social media practitioner or marketer to do something in a very particular way. And I think it's just learning that more and more people have access to the internet. More and more people have content that we're finding more frequently. So it's just, as marketing teams, as social teams, adjusting and leaning more towards reinvention, which I hear less of, and that gives me a little less internal apprehension.
There's so much content being consumed and so much content being created that it's like fueling this need for like instant gratification. Like whether or not like that's like you as a brand like or social media manager creating that content, like you just feel like you constantly have to like churn things out. But even as like consumers, like how many hours a day do you spend like scrolling? I feel like all of that kind of just feeds into this like cycle.
It affects our attention spans.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just, that sort of directly affects how we're consuming things and when we want things and how we want things.
That adds to the pressure, right? Like differentiation, standing out, those are some like key pillars of good marketing. And one of the ways to do that is, even if it's something's like a reinvention, it's putting your own spin on it.
Knowing when to lean in and when to just watch that trend move past you, which is very hard sometimes, I think, because marketers have to have at least a general idea of what's happening across social culture.
100%. It's not just like knowing what's happening and being in tune with like what's happening in the moment. It is about like understanding the culture around it, not just seeing it and knowing it's a trend and hopping on it.
Do you think reinvention fuels innovation, or like does it ever hinder it?
I think it's an interesting conversation to navigate. We're experiencing things that feel like they just happened, but like already like accelerating through them again is like stylish or cool. Social is driving all of that. Is that to say that social is hindering us from trying or developing anything new? Even though it's referencing something that's already existed and already happened, something new is being brought to it by whatever is culturally happening that brought it back.
Where brands and marketing teams fit in to do this well is learning how to navigate the speed of social and reminding yourself as social marketing teams, how does this ladder up to the business? And, you know, one I think of is like book talk on TikTok has been a huge driver to book sales. Book sales have increased because of TikTok. And I'm deep on book talk a lot of times, and I'm scrolling through TikTok, and there'll be this new Barnes & Noble. They have their own TikTok, and they're doing interviews around books. And I think that has reinvigorated book sales and publishing. And so I think doing it with that focus and intention at the speed of social is where the sweet spot for brands lies.
100%. There's a bookstore chain in Maine out here where I live called Books A Million, and they have the book talk shelves filled with all the different like sections and anime merch, video game merch. A lot of that stuff has like blown up over like these fandom communities, and it's just awesome to see that these communities also have their own little like sub movements, and that influences purchasing things that might be under purchased or not have as much visibility. And I'm a huge fan of Book Talk.
I feel like that is like a really good example of like how reinvention creates some of like the moments that make us love social the most, because it's like just reflective of like the exact time period that we're in. Yeah, creators and Book Talk and like Barnes and Noble and all these other like small mom and pop bookshops are like seeing that and like acting on it.
The culture around it is being reinvented by Book Talk because of the little rituals that the community itself has, the way that they organize and annotate everything together, a lot of like the language they create around it, like certain terms that are like so niche to just the community on Book Talk.
I also love like when I see them talking about Goodreads, I see people shout out Goodreads all the time or talk about the usage. And I'm like, if I was the social person for Goodreads, I would be all over TikTok.
Bookstores and bookshops on TikTok, like small businesses and like chains like Barnes and Noble, are absolutely killing like the content game.
They're
they
so
are
delightful,
so good,
lovely, like
yes,
authentic, and I just want to meet all of their staff every video. And, and it's so
every
easy,
single time.
and it's simple, right? What they're doing is going around catering it to their industry, asking staff members recommendations, and repetitively. Like that is such a easy content funnel for marketing and social strategy.
I think it's also very encouraging that like they're literally listening to the people who are on Book Talk to lead their strategy for like in-store displays and things like that, which I actually feel like is pretty uncommon.
And the way that they let the franchises kind of do it,
it's not all the same everywhere.
I love that they let them own it. Yeah,
they localize it. It helps personalize it. It's not relying on just one account. Like it's so smart.
Have we seen any other like products that have communities that have been like reinvigorated and reinvented in that way?
I had one Instax and Fujifilm.
Yeah.
And this is like taking us back a little bit, but I think we're sort of on like the other side of it, that it's a cool like reflection moment. But like, as we all know, film started to die in like the early 2000s. Once everything went digital, I think it was really fascinating that Fujifilm kind of like saw that gap in like a need for physical documentation again, because I feel like Tumblr is sort of when people started to like have that like Tumblr aesthetic where you're taking photos of photos that are like on instant film, and like they just saw that. What they did is like reinvented the instant camera, because Polaroid was not producing film or cameras anymore. Really, no one was producing any type of film camera anymore. And so they reinvented like what that instant film camera was and created Instax. And so now it was just like film became more affordable, or instant film did. And then look at the industry now, like Polaroid is back. Film prices are increasingly expensive now because there's so much demand.
Which is so fascinating, because to reinvest as a business in film, something that was like bankrupt a decade ago.
Yeah.
It's like as soon as instant film kind of went away, people were immediately wanted to bring it back. And aesthetic community is like on Tumblr that were like, we want this back. Or even if you remember like early, like Instagram's original icon was, the little like Polaroid, the framing and like the filters that make it look like it's like a Polaroid.
They totally like transformed just that industry in general, because like it started with Instax kind of as that like resurgence point. I mean, from there, I mean, think about like it was more about instant film than film as a whole industry. Now, I mean, Kodak, Polaroid, like legacy film brands are like coming back, and camera brands like Leica is creating like digital cameras now, but like they shoot like old film cameras.
I would say a lot of the credit has to go to those younger generations. And like
100%.
How Liz, as you were saying, like 2013 Instagram, like, so I used to work at a company called Ink 361. It was the only place you could go online to look at Instagrams, because Instagram at the time was only a mobile app. And it was my first foray into a large community. It was all artist community, photography community, and like people used to call them IGers, like Igers. They showcased such strong numbers and interest, and just came out in droves that like that had to have an influence on the resurgence of some of these things and the continued use of it. I remember like Kim Kardashian, she had a Polaroid era, and I feel like things like that are calculated and importantly so, and to like make the moment, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome to see, even if indirectly, how social has had an impact on that industry. I think that's such a good example.
I have so much accessibility to taking photos on my phone. Those mean less and less. Like, I got a Instax camera over the holidays, and so that excites me to have intention around the photos I want to keep and hold on to, because I have, I don't know, you can check it, like 20,000 photos in my phone right now.
I'm
like,
right there with you.
Yeah.
Like, if I looked at my phone, it was probably like 30,000. I don't delete anything.
No.
I feel like everyone at some point has like a Instax or like Polaroid era, because like, I mean, Rachel, you just brought up Kim Kardashian. Taylor Swift had like, I mean, her whole 1989 album was Instax themed, and then like for Reputation, like at her tour, they had like Instax like sponsored some kind of like photo op thing. I feel like some of that is a little bit of a risk. When no one was making film, they were like, we're gonna do it again and we're gonna bring it back. So like, what is like the risk, I guess, of like relevance and like kind of like gambling on something like that, and like what is the payoff?
In this case, I feel like the payoff was like invaluable. Like, this was priceless, but it was a huge risk because they didn't know where it was going to go as a brand. So you kind of have to feel it as a brand and kind of like dive in, because if you're just waiting to see your competitors do it, is it even a risk?
Because if you sit around and you don't take a risk, you're wasting time. Like, I think I say this to my team all the time, but like, doing it today is the best day to do it, because otherwise, like, once you get started, things get into motion. And that's why going at the speed of social is such an advantageous, like,
because it's so fast
thing for brands.
Yeah,
because it's so fast that you have to innovate.
It's literal days.
It's critical.
Yeah, like you have days to kind of like figure out if this is something that's going to work for you or not on social, because after a week it's old.
With the Instax example, like, that was a business pivot, that was a huge economic leap too. And so like, understanding how to do the right research to balance not moving too slow and too fast, and using social as a litmus test, as a lower stakes experimental space, whether from listening or a social first and only campaign to gauge interest that ladders up to more economical impact from businesses to lean in on a new product or whatnot. And so I think the bigger the risk, you do have to balance not moving too fast on social too. Like
it's really about like weighing like the immediate risk with like long-term benefit, because like if you think about it, and we were just talking about like younger generations, Instax was probably like one of the first cameras that like Gen Z had when they were like growing up or like in high school or whatever. And now, if Fujifilm would have continued on the same path as like Canon and Nikon in that like critical point when they decided to start developing film again, they would probably just be in the same place that Nikon and Canon are in right now, which is like still pushing digital, but younger generations that are into photography are now buying Fujifilm. So I think it was kind of like this like long game, to your point, Greg. Like, some of those calculated risks are immediate, and some of those things you should jump on like really quickly, but also some of that is just like people grew up with it, that's like their like legacy brand now, you know?
100%. How do we become quicker about analyzing and doing the research so we can continue to keep up with the speed of social? I think that's where the superpower is. So I think these examples lead into a great topic for us to kind of consider of, originality. Will we ever be bored when it comes to reinvention, either as a consumer or as a marketer?
Is reinvention sustainable is kind of a deeper question of like, how do you, and we kind of touched on this a little bit of like, what does it take to systematically constantly be listening to the social audience that you're going after, or to keep an ear open for new social audiences or new trends that emerge on new networks or new apps that might be catering to your audience?
I think that's why risk is so important, because we may get sick of just like the sort of like element of reinvention. Like, when you think about like how they're constantly like remaking movies that already exist, or when do you just take a risk and create something totally original, things that you haven't seen yet? Like, when do you start leaning into that, and what's that payoff look like?
It's also just kind of a sign of the times too, because kind of going back to the point, like there's so much content being created. There's so much more like demand for reinvention and innovation that like it just doesn't seem like it's happening as much.
Like reinvention to me doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. It can just be remembering the audiences. Like I am more of a Vine generation and becoming more attuned to TikTok, right? And so reminding ourselves that there's a whole group of people on TikTok now of all generations that weren't on Vine, that weren't deep on the viral YouTube moments of when I was in middle school and high school. And so how do we refresh those and make those happen in an authentic, enjoyable way? Like
there is a creator on TikTok that she will take like current songs and make them 80s songs, but I think she's like, I mean, in her early 20s or like late teens or something like that. So obviously she didn't grow up in the 80s. I didn't grow up in the 80s, but like I love watching how she adapts like Bloody Mary or like some like, or like Paparazzi or something by like Lady Gaga, or music from a sushi restaurant from Harry Styles into like an 80s song.
I think she did Carly Rae and Whitney Houston
recently,
she does like
a ton of them. It's so cool.
Yes.
I mean, it's not even like a nostalgia play because it's just someone from an even younger generation just like creating at that point.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is it that somebody who was not even connected to that generation is finding connection to it through social?
And I think that's such a power for brands that are quote unquote dubbed as like boring or they can't be exciting. Another example for that, I think, from a brand and marketing perspective is the fruit roll-ups resurgence. And, you know, I think this is a lesson for me that it's never too late to become part of the conversation, even if you're not the one as the brand to start that conversation, because everyone was talking about freezing fruit roll-ups, adding ice cream. It was all my TikTok.
And weren't people giving fruit roll-ups ideas too to like what you can like, weren't they saying like make like a naturally free, like make your own freezable fruit roll-up or
and
something?
So what fruit roll-ups did, they weren't on TikTok, but because of all of this, they had a savvy social media practitioner team and they joined TikTok. They created a handful of content that leaned into this conversation. They did the testing and now like it was, I feel, in the tens of thousands in a matter of a couple of weeks. And so they didn't start that conversation. They didn't start the trend, but they leaned into it. And then they authentically showed up in a way that I enjoyed as a consumer and as a marketer.
Well, even like thinking about physical products, so many people want like the Smeg refrigerator or like
I do.
Yeah, I mean, I do too.
100%
like, it's
do.
Beautiful.
Guilty.
But yeah, like that's a completely retro design, and like their like Frigidaire I saw has like super like retro looking like blender now, and like this whole line of like toasters that's like that like retro vibe, and brands are starting to lean into what consumers are saying they want.
Even though it's reinvention, it still feels new because it's just sort of, it's informed by everything that's happening around it. And like there are modern twists to it, modern elements that make it feel now.
It's so influenced by creators who are consumers. Like, I feel like Emily Mariko, I don't know if she has a Smeg refrigerator, but I feel like that's something that seems like aligned. And to go back really quickly on the fruit roll-ups, like that creator was Goalie's Dream. She's awesome. And now I watch her for other things too. I love that like the fruit roll-ups team tagged her in the first video and was like, knock knock, like I guess we need to be on TikTok, like acknowledge that they were listening, like. And so when brands like Smeg or other ones, like when they do have their moments, it's very encouraging to me to see them like be very open with their audience about that.
What does this look like 10 years from now? Because now is like the time when like we are kind of going back and like tapping into all of these like past generations. Millennials and Gen Z are really the only ones that are like experiencing this because we're the only two generations that have like grown up on the internet.
Yeah. I think it'll just look like different based on where people gather on the internet. Like the networks have so much influence on how content is presented. Even things that were trends on Instagram are now trends on TikTok, or things that have already trended on Twitter are trending again on TikTok or whatever, because they have like different approaches. So whatever happens 10 years from now will probably be more recycling, but like in different formats and in different ways to consume them.
There will be moments where there's disruption throughout and the pendulum will swing. But I think we'll get to a point where, okay, we've seen this thing. When we were brainstorming, one of my examples, like for reinvention, is like Lady Gaga's art pop album. During the moment, I was like, pass. Now I'm like, what was she? She's an artiste. And so, I think there's a bunch of stuff that's hitting the cutting room floor now in cultural moments that we're ignoring, maybe that aren't avant-garde in the current moment, that will make for great marketing fodder down the road that creators will pick up in the same way or whatever that looks like. So I think it is definitely unpredictable.
And that's the thing about capitalizing on a moment, is it might go somewhere and it might be everything or it might be nothing. And you just have to kind of be willing to roll those dice. No matter what, you like learn something from it. You get data back from it. I personally feel like risks are more often than not worth it.
Marketing is a discipline. There are things that are tried and true that work in marketing. Like when you see an Apple commercial or you see like a Google commercial and they pull on your heartstrings, and like no matter what scenario, like at the end of the day, they remember they're marketing to humans, and good marketing will always like appeal to how your product impacts the people who use it, like their everyday lives. There's also things you can always like try and venture into new spaces and new trends and new topics and innovate. But even just by hitting like the major tenets of marketing, you'll have an original, unique, and like creative piece, I think.
We've been talking a lot about taking risks. What do we think being unexpected looks like for brands on social?
I found this list of most innovative brands for 2023 on Fast Company. What I found interesting about it is like half of the folks on the list, so it's McDonald's, Liquid Death, Oreo, Marvel Studios, Taco Bell, Crocs, Riot Games, AB InBev, which I was like, what is that? It's Michelob Ultra. Dove and Cortez, which I hadn't heard about before. But then I was looking deeper into it, and like the Oreo example is pretty dope. It's like for using creativity for standing up with its values. And they did like a partnership with PFLAG, created this like award-winning documentary that is all part of their like lifelong ally campaign. And so I just was like so taken aback by that.
I love that. And like having worked on the lifelong ally campaign at PFLAG, like Oreo always takes that, whether it's the Lady Gaga cookies. Again, can you tell I'm a Lady Gaga fan?
I feel like we've all mentioned Lady Gaga at some point now.
My plan is working. But I think, like what they did with the Lifelong Ally campaign is they put messages to the LGBTQ plus community on their packaging from allies. I think what is unexpected about all of those examples is like, again, saturation, but like packs of cookies in stores. Like we partnered with Michelle Visage from RuPaul's Drag Race on a contest and a giveaway. And so like those moments, like if you're not in stores looking for cookies, you might be on TikTok or Instagram looking for content and stumble upon that. And so I really like those examples.
There is sort of like almost like a little bit more of like a freedom to be unexpected in spaces that aren't like brick and mortar. So that's why so much is happening on social, or things are even happening a little more behind the scenes like that. Like it's so cool that Oreo created this asset, even though it's not like push it on this platform, push it on that platform, put up signage in stores or whatever. It's like they still create it because they have values and they stick to them. And I think that's just like good instincts as a brand.
The space where brands can play with like being unexpected too is awareness focused. Like Oreo creating a documentary like didn't have like a direct goal to like purchase more cookies. It was more about like their values.
Sometimes marketers underestimate how like intelligent consumers can be. People can suss out things that you're not really connected to. The reason consumers are so like savvy onto marketing these days is because everything is just so like exposed. Like you can access any information you want. People are content creators now. So it's like there's this like in-between world of being kind of a marketer and being just like the average consumer.
And one of the examples that just happened recently that kind of popped into my head is the Ritz example. So Ritz had started a tweet. They were like, reply with the open hand emoji and we'll give you a Ritz cracker. And so this kicked off a wildfire trend on Twitter where all of these brands were doing similar things. And I think the one that stood out to me was GoFundMe. What they did was respond with this emoji and we're going to donate $5 to a GoFund, like one of the GoFundMe many campaigns. And of the ones that stuck out, I think that brand entering that conversation as a crowd fundraising platform it stuck out from all of the others that were just emoji engagement grab, right?
I think marketers almost have to exist in this space. It's almost like a stand-up comedian. Like, you are going to get crickets or you're not. Like, it's going to either the material is going to work or it's not. And you just have to suck it up and go on stage again and refine it.
Yeah.
And that can be like a challenging place to be as a human. Like, I'll say
Totally.
it's not easy to see like an idea flop, but it also is the best feedback you're ever going to get.
I love that.
That kind of like reminds me about the Emma Chamberlain podcast episode, because like her take on this was kind of that like creativity is more difficult to achieve now because we crave so much instantly, and like creativity takes time. I feel like I could see like both sides of this, but I actually really agree with that. Like, I can record this like video or something like that, but like sometimes it's just like when you are in a creative rut, like you're almost like grabbing for like a way out of it, and like sometimes that just makes it worse because you just like continue to spiral down and you just feel like you're in this like pit.
I think sometimes those spirals come from like our feelings of like the people who are approving our content. We have to have some flops so that we can learn and kind of like pivot and not just like make assumptions about what our audience is responding to. If it's possible that you can like level set more with like leadership and whoever is approving your moves on social, so that you can feel more comfortable taking those risks and potentially flopping sometimes and just like learning and moving on. Also, the algorithms aren't kind to creativity. You're constantly in demand to be creating to keep your kind of like views at a certain level.
So I think it's all about being strategic about having stuff in your repertoire, and when are you spending like that much more time on a calculated risk versus taking maybe a little bit less risk, but showing up every day.
Zaria, she's wonderful at Duolingo, and she recently had like a LinkedIn post about taking a big break. She was talking about tying your creativity to yourself and your worth. And I think that's like a whole episode on its own about the burnout there and how that definitely is like a big part of trying to do your best and take risks and be unexpected.
There are like marketing principles that will always work. And so like when are the moments to like lean into that and be okay with it not being the most creative thing ever, so you have that time and space to experiment and like think of a better idea. It's like it is all balance, and like you will find yourself in those
totally.
like terrible spirals sometimes, but then you'll also have those like aha moments and like really fun times when you're like, this is a really fun creative idea and like it landed, and like that's the best feeling ever. All right, so that brings us to the end of our second episode. If you agree or disagree with our takes, we want to hear from you, so leave us a comment and tell us your thoughts. Thank you again to our director Mal and Shannon from OpenReel. We could not produce this without you. And then cue end of video rituals again. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, activate notifications, and follow us on social at Sprout Social. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bam.
That was a good walk off.
10 out of 10.